What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin and welcome back to Resculpted. In this series, we'll take a scene, image, or product and try to recreate it within Cinema 4D and Redshift. Some recreations will be very similar where others will fall short, but the goal is to see exactly how close we can get it. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun one today, so without further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so jumping right into it today, this is the image we are trying to recreate here. I think what's so nice about this is just the composition, and there's so much depth within the scene, and then it uses a lot of natural material and has this really nice muted tones here, and those muted tones really help out with making the tree and some of the leaves kind of pop out quite a bit here. So I like how we kind of have this specific focal point within the scene here. So we're looking down a hallway to this outside area, and so one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because I really like the material that they used here. You have a lot of different wood, you have a lot of vegetation, and then this kind of a muted sky that again kind of helps push out those bright colors that comes from the tree and then the flowers down below here. So, and then as far as the lighting goes, you have these really nice warm tones here that's kind of scattering across the foregrounds, and then you have this light that's kind of coming from the outside that's illuminating the circle area here, and then you do have some lights that is on the wall as well too. And so I think when we are operating within Cinema 4D and Redshift, we have a really cool opportunity when it comes to creating a lot of different cool lighting effects that we can kind of recreate this. So I'm imagining we'll use some gobos and a few different lighting techniques to help kind of recreate this. So you have lighting in the foreground, on the wall, and then of course you have a few different lighting sources outside here too. So, but I'm excited for this one. This is going to be an interesting one. I haven't really done something like this with so much depth before, but let's hop into Cinema 4D and get this started. Alright, so jumping right into Cinema 4D, I'm just going to bring in a cube and shrink it down. And then what I'm going to do is just change the size here to about 400 by 400. And then I'm just going to rename this floor. And then just copy and paste and bring this up. And then I'm just going to rotate this and put this into perspective here. I'm going to bring in a Redshift camera and just kind of zoom in our Redshift camera here just to get in the right perspective. And about there is good. Let me just adjust this and just kind of shift this. Cool. So I'm just going to bring our camera down, and then I'm just going to bump this up to about 200 here. Cool. So right about here is going to work quite well. And then I'm just going to change this to 600. Cool. And so what I'm doing is I'm just making some minor tweaks here, just because it is super important that we get our foundational pieces correct. I want my perspective to be right, and then of course our floor and ceiling here, just to make sure that everything is looking good. So it's super important to make sure you get this right in order to kind of have everything fall into place here. So I'm just going to rename this ceiling real quick. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is just copy and paste and rotate this 90 degrees. And then I'm just going to bring that up so it's nice and flush both on the floor and ceiling, and then just copy and paste as well to create that other side here. And then I'm just going to kind of adjust this. And then I'm just going to rename this left and rename this right. Cool. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this part here, rotate this, and then I'm just going to get out of our perspective and then just kind of move this cube to about there. And then what I'm going to do is bring in a cylinder here, and the cylinder is going to help us create that nice circle that we see in our original image. And so I'm actually going to increase our segments here so we get this nice circle without any sort of edges here. And then I'm just going to bring in a bool and put our cylinder and our cube into the bool here. Going to reorganize this and just rename this real quick. And of course, I'm just trying to stay a little bit more organized here. So I'm trying to kind of rename these pieces so I know exactly what these are looking like. Next up, I'm going to bring in the Redshift render view just to see what my perspective looks like so we can get this circle looking a little bit better here. So I'm just going to kind of move this, and then I'm just going to kind of widen this a little bit more, bring this down, just because if you could see in our actual original image, the circle doesn't connect, and so we need to make sure that we're leaving a little bit more room here. And then let me just fit this to the entire window so we can see our actual whole perspective here. And so we're getting a little bit closer. Let me just grab this here. And then I'm just going to move this wall here slightly. To about there. And then our other wall to about there. And then I'm just going to adjust our camera here. So what I'm going to do is just change the resolution here to 2K. And that is going to kind of box out our image here, just because our original image kind of has more of a square shape. So in order to replicate this, we need to make sure we're looking like the original piece as much as possible. So, and then I'm just going to give it a quick save. So now we have the basic idea of our image here. We have the circle, our two walls, our floor and ceiling. So I think this is looking pretty good as recreating the foundational look here. So next up, what I'm going to do is just get out of this perspective here, rotate the camera, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this cube, bring this up. This cube, we're just going to recreate that outside roof that we see in our original image here. And then what I'm doing is, before we put in our lighting, I'm just going to readjust a few of these shapes just to make sure that everything is touching each other where it should be. I want to make sure that there are 0 gaps here. And then just to test this out, I'm just going to bring out a area light, rotate this, and then just kind of use this light to see if everything is actually flush against each other. And we'll just move that real quick, and then I'll move this back, and then I'm just going to bring in this plane here just to see what that is looking like as far as our foundational piece for outside. I'm just going to copy and paste our bool and actually delete most of the bool here, and then just use this cube as this fence here. And I think that is looking pretty good. I'm just trying to look to make sure that about halfway through this circle is where the fence is. So I think that is looking pretty good there. I'm just double checking everything. Next up, I'm going to bring in a cylinder. Move this over. And I'm just going to rotate my camera here. And then just shrink this down. And then I'm just creating those beams that you see in our original image here. And just about there is kind of where we see it. And then just to make things easier, just going to copy and paste and move this. And again, this is just creating our foundational idea of everything. If this was a drawing, this would be our rough sketch. Before we actually get into creating more of those fine lines, we're just getting a general idea, making sure the perspective is good, making sure all of our shapes are the correct proportion. So this is what I enjoy doing, is just creating that rough sketch initially of what we're going to make here, and we'll make a few minor changes just to kind of represent this a little bit more appropriately. So I'm just going to adjust our cylinder here real quick. And then just move our ceiling ever so slightly up. Cool. So I think that is a good start. Of course, we can always adjust it, but that is looking pretty good so far. Next up, I'm going to bring in this cube and just shrink this down. And just move this back. And with this cube, I'm going to make the beams up top here. So if you can see in our original image, there are a few beams that you can actually see within the image. So I'm just going to take this cube and make sure this is flush against this wall here, and just zoom in a little bit here. And then I'm just going to place this about right over here. Again, I'm just going to get a rough idea, and we can always kind of tweak it as we go. I'm going to copy and paste. This one is about here. And then this one is, let's see, about right here is okay. And then I'm just going to select all of these and then just kind of bring them up a little bit to about there. And then just copy and paste again and move this over to about here. And then I'm just looking at our original image here. Again, just making sure that these are in the right spot here. Do have another cube-like shape over here. And then I also have this one as well too. Okay, cool. So this is looking pretty good so far. Cool. So next up, what I'm going to do is just grab our left side, copy and paste, and I'm just going to move this around and shrink this down. And so this is where we're going to kind of make that window area over here. And so I'm just going to try and proportion it correct here. And then in order to pull this off, we're going to create a bool out of this. So I'm just going to take the cube we just brought in here, put this in the bool. And then next up, we're going to take our original one and bring that into the bool as well. And then just going to kind of move this to about there. Awesome. Cool. So that is working how it should. And then if you look in our image, we do have kind of this baseboard here. So I'm just going to copy and paste and then bring this cube down. And about here is kind of where it stops. So that is looking pretty good there. I'm just kind of double checking everything. Now I'm going to copy and paste, bring this up. And then I'm just going to change the size to about 5 by 5. And then actually I'm just going to change it to 2.5 by 2.5. It's a little bit more to what is in our picture here. And then I'm just going to copy and paste and bring this down. And then to get this absolutely as close as possible, I'm just going to make some minor adjustments to our Y direction here. And then I'm just going to change that to 157 here. Okay, next up, I'm just going to copy and paste. And then with this one, I'm just going to bump this down to 142. And so we're just doing increments of 15 here. And then with this one down to 127. And then I'm just going to copy and paste, just kind of bring that down. And then I'm just going to grab all these, copy and paste, and rotate these to about there. And just kind of adjust it. Cool. So we have that. However, it is a little too small here as far as our cubes go. So I'm just going to delete that here. So what I'm going to do to fix this is I'm just going to kind of delete every other one here. And then I'm just going to make sure I have all of these correct here. And then I'm just going to copy and paste. And then just push this one up. Cool. So I have all of these here. Now I'm going to copy and paste, rotate this to about there. So that is a little bit more correct here. That is actually looking just as proportionate as our image. I'm just going to adjust this here slightly. But yeah, the size of those squares are a lot better than what we had. So that is looking pretty good. So again, most of this beginning process, think of it as your rough draft. You're just kind of getting the basic idea. So you're going to have to go back and kind of rework a lot of this here, but that is looking pretty good. Next up, what I'm going to do is just copy and paste all of this and bring this over to the other side just to make it easy. And then I'm just going to get rid of that for right now. And then let me just actually undo this. I'm just going to kind of make sure that this is somewhat in the scene here as far as our wall goes, just because in our original image we do see the wall here on the right side, where most of the left side is mainly this window area over here. Now I'm just going to hop into our perspective here, and I'm just going to try and rotate this. Actually, I'm just going to bring this back a little bit more. This right here is a little bit more to our perspective here. And then what I'm going to do is just bring our wall over just a tad bit more here to about there. And then I'm just adjusting this. So I did rotate the camera a little bit here. Gonna move this. And then I'm just going to hop into Grayscale Gorilla right here. I'm going to type in paper. And we're going to find some sort of paper texture that kind of represents what is in our image here. The reason I'm using paper is because we're going to have some more like tannish textures here that are somewhat see-through, and so I want to kind of recreate that just so I can kind of get a better idea of what the scene is looking like, especially once we bring in a lot of different lights. I want this texture to be somewhat see-through, just like it is in the actual image. So we're just going to try to find a couple options here and test it out. So let me bring in this material and put this on top of our new cube here. And I'm just going to adjust it. Actually take this cube, move this over to the left side, and then hop into the node editor. And then I'm just going to see what I can do here that can kind of bring in a little bit more light here to make it a bit more translucent. I'm going to make it 100 by 100. And there we go. So it was the transmission weight. Just going to adjust that, make it slightly a more warmer tone there. And about there is going to be a good start. Again, when we don't have a ton of textures, light is going to bounce a different way here, so this is a good start. And then once we add in a lot more of our materials, we'll be able to kind of adjust that as well. Next up, we're bringing in a spotlight, and I'm just going to try and pump in a little bit more light here. I'm actually going to jump over to Grayscale Gorilla, and there is a few different gobos here of plants. So I'm just going to kind of pop this in here. And then just kind of play with the exposure just so we can kind of see what that is looking like. And then I'm just going to kind of turn off that light there, and then we're just going to see what that looks like in the render view. Now I'm just going to copy and paste that cube here and just bring this over. Let's see. Let's do about here just so we can kind of see that cross hatching that we did there. Cool. And then I'm just going to give it a quick save. Next up, I'm going to bring in another spotlight here, and we're just going to kind of rotate this. Then I'm just going to kind of bring this back, and then I'm just going to change this to a more warmer tone here. And then I'm going to copy and paste that and just slightly change the tone there so it is more of a darker color here. And then I'm just going to kind of move this so we kind of get this nice blend of two different warm lights, and hopefully that could kind of blend it a little bit better here as far as our light source goes. So it's not one specific color. It seems a little bit more organic with a few different tones there. Next up, I'm going to kind of play around with our original area lights just so we could kind of see what that is looking like. Now, we did blow out a lot of the foreground here, so we don't have those different shadows that we see originally. And then what I'm going to do is just go to Redshift, bring in a spotlight here, and then just kind of bring this back, rotate this. And so what we're going to do is just try and create those nice little highlights and shadows in our foreground here. And so I'm just going to move this up and bring this back. And I'm just going to change this to slightly a warmer tone here. And then we are going to go up to grayscale, go into our gobos, and let's see, I think maybe this one will be cool. yeah, it kind of brings out really unique different textures there. So we're just going to kind of rotate this, bring this down a bit, increase our exposure so we can kind of push in more of those highlights. And so if you could kind of see there, we do get those nice streaks across our floor, very similar to our actual image here. Let me just kind of pump up the warmness here. Yeah, that that looks a lot better here. And then let me just kind of play around with our fall off. And then I'm just going to kind of block this out just because I want to see exactly how this contributes to this foreground here. So right about there would be good. Let me actually just stretch out this box. And yeah, looking at that, that looks pretty good. Very similar to our reference. So we are looking good there. I'm going to check off our box and then just drop this down to a 2 just so it's not as bright. Give it a save. Jump back into a area light here, rotate this. And so if you look at our reference, we do have these really distinct lights that are on this wall here. So we're just going to recreate that. I'm just going to kind of push this area light to the wall here, give it a slightly warm tone, shrink this down. To about here. And really I'm just trying to kind of fix this to this area here. And then I'm just going to reduce down the spread just because this area does have a really nice highlight, but the spread isn't as strong as in the image here. And so really we just need to kind of reduce that down and kind of create a little bit more of a box versus something that is a little bit more kind of spread out here. So reducing this down, we get a little bit more of those sharp angles. So that's definitely what we're looking for there. And I'm just kind of moving this back and forth just to see what contributes to what. And then I'm just going to reduce this. I'm going to copy and paste. And then we do have another somewhat bright area light over here. So I'm just trying to kind of put that in the proper place here. I'm just going to reduce our spread. To a 0.1. And then I'm just going to fix our original light here. Let's bump this up to a 0.2. Reduce down this warmness here to a little bit more of just like more of a white light here. Cool. So looking at this, we brought in a foreground. We have this nice light that's coming through our wall here, and then we have more of these kind of square, some window lights actually against this wall here. So this is looking pretty good. Cool. So now that we have our lights somewhat set up appropriately, I'm just going to turn these off again, give it a quick save. And now we're going to shop around for materials. So I'm going to look at a few different wood textures, both in Redshift and also in Grayscale Gorilla. So we're going to try and find something that is going to be good for both inside this home here, and then also some wood for outside as well. So we're just going to kind of look around. This wood that is actually inside is much more of a dark wood here on the floor. And then on the top, you do have this dark wood, but you see a little bit more of this panel texture here. So again, we're just going to kind of play around with how this looks. So I'm just going to take this wood texture and drop this down to the floor. And then I'm just going to put a Redshift tag on it. and turn on displacement as well. So looking at it, it is a nice wood texture, but that's not really what we're looking for here. Let me try this one here. And this texture is rather large, so I'm just going down to our UV length here and just going to reduce that down to about 50% to make these planks a little bit smaller here. And then I'm just going to apply this to the outside here. And then I'm just going to see how this one looks. Let's go back into grayscale. Let's type in oak. And let's see what options we have for oak here. Let's type in plank here just to see what options we have under plank. And then I'm just going to go over to Redshift and just do the same thing here, type in plank and see what options we have. And this one looks like a good one here, so let's bring in this one here. And then I'm just going to apply that to the floor here. And that's a little bit better. Let's reduce this down to about 50% each. And then I'm going to kind of box this out just so we can kind of see this render a little bit quicker here. And then let me just put in this one again. So I think with this wood that we have here, this is probably the best for right now. If we do find some different wood, we can always change it, but I think what we have right now is going to be pretty good. And then, like I said, we can always adjust depending on if we find something else here, but we need to find a different wood texture for some of our other pieces here. So I'm just going to type in oak. Cool. So I'm just going to apply this to this cube down here. And that looks pretty similar to our reference. So I'm just going to kind of apply that to the rest of these here. And that looks pretty good. Let me just jump back into grayscale real quick. Make sure we didn't miss anything here. And again, just going to use that same texture here for the rest of the wood. And then let me see what the ceiling can look like here. And then I'm just going to increase the segments for our ceiling. And then I'm just going to reduce down the UV length here. And then I'm just going to kind of jump out of our perspective here and then see what we can do on this outside area here. I'm going to go into our lights, bring in an area light, move this over. And really with this, I'm just trying to create a nice looking light source that kind of casts across this fence area here. I'm just going to copy and paste this area light, rotate it, and kind of use this as our sky or our kind of backlight here. So this is going to be good. Of course, it's too bright, so let's drop it down to about 15 here. And then let me try slightly a warmer color. Let me drop it down to a 10 and a -2 for our exposure. And then I'm just going to move this one to about there. So we do get this nice light source. So that is looking pretty good. Let me add this wood texture to the top here. Let me try this one. And this one. I don't think any of these are going to be the right look here. So let's hop into Grayscale Gorilla again. Just type in brown to see what we have. As funny as it is, I think this leather one might be a better look. Nope. Let's go into Redshift here. Just trying to think of a few other things to type in here. I'm looking at these planks. Let me just try this one. I think that one would actually look good for the fence here. Let me just adjust this. And it looks like this is somewhat transparent, it looks like. So let me just undo this. Just jump into this, drop this down to about 50 each. Let's see. Let me just take that off real quick. See if I can find anything else. Well, we'll have to think about that one. In the meantime, let's apply a few different colors to these poles here. No, that one doesn't look good. Let's see. Let's do some thinking on that. For now, we can do some a little bit more modeling here. Let's bring in a cube and let's kind of make this nice pathway here. Just going to copy and paste. Bring this up. And to about there. Let me actually box this out so we can see it a little bit better. And then I'm just going to apply this material on here. And increase our segments here. And apply a Redshift tag to add some displacement. And I'm just looking at our reference real quick. Going to kind of bring this up, bring this a little closer, and then I'm just going to copy and paste. We're going to rotate this just slightly so it looks a little bit more curved. And then just copy and paste. And the reason why we are rotating this is just to give it a little bit more life. These planks don't look exact. They look somewhat older or a little worn. So by rotating it just slightly, we're just going to kind of bring in a little bit more life to some of these planks here. And let me just kind of play around with the size. I think a 140 might be a little bit better here. So 145. Yeah, I think maybe a 145 is going to be better. Just going to copy and paste that. Kind of bring this back. And then just copy and paste these last two here. And while doing this, I'm looking at our reference, and this is looking pretty good here. Just going to jump into Grayscale Gorilla once again. Next up, I'm thinking about putting some of those pots here in place. So let's check out what Grayscale Gorilla has here real quick. And then I'm just going to go over to Redshift and try and see if we have something. No. Let's see. Actually, this one might be useful here, so let's just bring this in. I'm going to increase the size here and just move this to about here. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this and move this over here as well. Now I'm going to go to materials, and we're going to try to find some sort of similar material here to what these pots actually look like. So if you can see in the reference, it has more of a ceramic look here. Actually, these woods are kind of nice. I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but as I'm trying to think of different materials here, I came across these. So let me bring in these woods here just to see what we can use these for. But again, really just looking for some sort of glossy pottery here. And then I'm just going to go into Redshift, kind of look for something similar here. And then while I'm doing this, I'm also looking at what kind of trees we can use as well. Oh, and actually there are these rocks as well too. Let me actually bring in some of these rocks. In our reference here, we do have quite a bit of rocks. Bring this out. And then just kind of rotate this just to get a similar shape here. Give it a quick save and then just increase the size. And then just kind of move this. See, about here is nice. Going to copy and paste that rock. Rotate this. And move this to about here, just because we do have some nice different rocks and bushes here, so those will be kind of good starting pieces here. And actually this gravel is pretty nice too, so we'll just bring in this gravel here just because we will need that a little bit later. I'm just not seeing anything here really. Let me bring in that plaster for our wall. Just apply that to our wall here. And then I'm just going to bring in this wood as well. It's a nice plank there that we may be able to use. That one would be quite good for our back wall there, so that is looking pretty good. And then just decrease the UV length to make the planks a little bit smaller here. And let me just push this down to about 25. Let me bring in a spotlight here. Just going to rotate that here. Bring this up. And bring this back. Just because if you look in our reference here, we have this really nice highlights that is kind of across this area here up in the front. I'm going to change it so it's more of a warmer tone here. And then let me just try and get this because it's casting across the floor here. And so I'm just going to try and tweak this a little bit just to get it right. Yeah, so kind of coming out there. I think we got the angle right. We just have to kind of play around with the spread here. Cool. So next up, what we're going to do is just apply a few of these different materials to this outside here, just to see if we could get somewhat similar to our reference. and that is looking closer. Let's continue to look here. Now let's look for a red tree here. I'm just going to type in red tree here just so we can find something that is somewhat comparable here to our reference. And actually this would look nice for our bush. So let's bring that in and move it back. And then let's see what this one is going to be like. So let's bring that in and move it off to the right. Let's first handle this bush that we have here. I know this isn't a bush, but we're going to turn it into one here. So let me kind of push this off to the side. And it is somewhat dark here, even though we do have quite a bit of lighting back here. It is pretty dark. So let me actually play around with this area light. And then let me bring this warmer tone in here and just kind of play around with this exposure. Let me bump this to 20 and then just kind of reduce that there. Give it a quick save. Let me just bump up the size of this tree here and then just kind of place it appropriately. Think about there is nice. Actually a little bit more. Cool, so that looks about right here. Let me give it a quick save and then just reduce down the size of our plant here. Rotate this. And then I'm just going to copy and paste, bring this over to about there. And kind of move this around. Now I know the outside is blown out quite a bit with this lights. We'll fix that, but we're just trying to find the right colors and materials here. I'm still trying to find a color for this pottery up front here. Ooh, let me try that one. Rotate our camera and then just apply it to our pottery. Let me turn off these lights. Cool, so that looks as close as I thought we can get it. So that looks pretty good there. I'm just going to take this beam, copy and paste, and we're just going to move this over, and we're just going to use this for our outside here, just because there's a beam that is stretching across this back end over here. So we're just going to do that here real quick. And about there is right, so that is looking pretty good. Let me just increase the size there. I think that looks about right. All right, so next up, what I have to do is just increase the size of these beams here, just to make sure that we don't see the top of them here in the render view. And then I'm just going to adjust this beam here real quick. And then, of course, we're seeing this really big light on our foregrounds, and you really can't see those really cool highlights that we established. So we have to go back into some of these area lights, and we have to exclude some stuff here. So let's just grab these lights and exclude our floor here, just so we can kind of darken the floor up, just so we can see those highlights that we brought in. And then that's a little bit better here. Of course, we'll continue to work on that later, but I think that is going to be looking okay. Next up, I'm going to bring in some grass. So let's actually bring this in. All right, so next up, we are going to bring in a Redshift matrix here, go down to objects, and then for our object, we need our plane to be our object here. So that is essentially the floor that we're going to put our grass on, and then bring in our grass here. And then we're just going to increase the count, say about 300. Let's give it a quick save. Bring up our Redshift render view and press play here. And as it pops up, we can see our grass back there. And then we are missing some color here. So let me just bring the wood over and just kind of fill these out. Cool. So that looks pretty good here. Let me actually zoom in. Cool. So we have all of our wood there. Cool. So this is looking pretty good. And then we need some more light here. So I'm just going to copy and paste our lights, rotate this, and just bring this over. And then just kind of have this sitting above here. To about there. Let me just increase the exposure and then just kind of play around with the tone there. And really, I'm just playing around with this area lights to make sure I'm representing it correctly here within our render view. Kind of stretch this out, rotate this. I'm just trying to see how this is interacting within the scene. I'm trying to see if this light impacts the tree at all. And no, not really. Let me just increase the exposure. No, that's too bright. So let me just bring it back down. Let me just widen this a little bit and see what it can do here. Let me hit full. Let me just go in and see what else I can do. Let me just go into our Redshift settings here. And if you can see in the reference, we do have a bit of a glow here. So I'm just going to turn on bloom and just kind of see what this does. Kind of increases that bloom there. So we kind of get this nice little bloom highlight here, which looks pretty nice. And then we can also turn on a LUT here just to kind of get the same overall look here. So I'm trying to find a LUT that looks somewhat comparable to our actual image here. All right, let me bring this down. Yeah, about there is looking pretty good. It's very similar to our reference here as far as just the overall tone goes. And then I'm still just trying to play with that warmness from the outside. And then while I'm working on this, let me actually turn off the bloom and just kind of wait to the end to use that. And then I'm just going to reduce down the intensity here and then reduce the exposure. Just because if you're looking at the reference, we do have some really nice highlights. Even in the sky, it stays somewhat muted here. So it's kind of a balance between bringing in this warm, really nice light and then keeping it, you know, somewhat dull as far as the sky goes. So I'm just trying to play around with some of these lights here just to make sure that we're trying to represent that appropriately here. And then I'm just going to fix the fence here real quick, just to make sure that is about halfway through that circle there. let me just go over to our spotlight here and then really just pump up the exposure so we can see more of those highlights. Just because the room is still somewhat dark, but we really need to focus on those highlights there to kind of do the same thing. Now I'm just going to rotate this. To about there, and then just kind of move this just to make sure that I'm getting the correct highlights here in the right position. We do have this kind of funky area here, so I'm just going to go over to that light, and then I'm just going to kind of adjust it as far as the fall off goes. And then I'm just going to kind of box that up and then see what we can do there. And then just kind of change it to more of a warmer tone. And then just put that as a 1 for the exposure, maybe a 1.5. And then what I'm going to do is just copy and paste that same light here, unbox this, and then just move this over. And then just rotate this, move this up, and then down here. And then just brighten up this area a little bit more, and then give it a quick save. Go into Grayscale Gorilla, and we're going to find a gobo that works well in here, so we kind of continue getting the nice highlights and the nice shadows here. So I'm just going to drop that in, and that looks a little bit better here. Let me just play with this angle and reduce down the exposure. And then let me just box this out just so I can kind of play around with this area. Maybe even doing lines would be better. So let me put some lines there. I'm just gonna move that light just to make sure those lines are somewhat horizontal in our image here. And rotate. Yeah, just about there. That is actually pretty good. Go to about 1.5. Cool. So we have some really nice highlights there, so that is looking pretty good. So I think we're good on these lights here. Next up, we have to work on this outside. All right, so what we're going to do for our outside is we're going to find some sort of bowl here, just because in our reference there's this nice little bowl piece here that is kind of behind the tree. So we're just going to use this, and then what I'm going to do is grab a deformer here, put in our bulge, and then I'm just going to increase the strength there just to kind of bowl out that bowl. And then I'm just going to kind of move that to the back here, and then I'm sure you guys can see some of those flowers on the ground here. What I did was I just took the flowers from the tree and placed that flower texture on a plane, made that plane very small, and just kind of spread that out there. So very simple stuff there, but just wanted to kind of skip past that for you guys, just because that's rather simple and tedious. So I didn't want to kind of waste your guys' time there with that in the video. But really, again, just took the flowers from the tree and then put it on a plane and kind of spread that out there. So pretty simple on that. So next up, what we're going to do is, if you look at the reference, there are some tiles that are coming off of the roof from the outside. So we're just going to replicate that. So I'm just going to bring in this texture here, bring in a cube, shrink down our cube, and put that nice tile on there. And then I'm just going to throw in a Redshift tag for displacements. And then we're just going to set up our camera here. And I placed that tile above that roof there. So that is looking pretty good. Next up, what we have to do is we're going to find some sort of clay texture to put onto our bowl. So we're going to throw in that texture onto that bowl there. And then we're just going to kind of look at this as a whole. We have some nice rocks and bushes here, and then our flowers. And then next up, what I'm going to do is just bring in a cylinder. And we turned on fillet here, just kind of round out that cylinder. And then we're going to kind of increase those segments there. And then what we'll do is just kind of copy and paste that and then kind of move that same shape up and down this pole here to kind of create that nice little accent on these poles. So I'm just going to do that here quickly. Copy and paste those and put it on our other pole here. And our poles are a little too bright. They're actually quite dark in the reference. So I'm just going to put some of these cylinders into this list here for the area lights. So the area light isn't affecting some of these here. So we want them a little bit darker and not really highlighted so much. So we're just trying to exclude the lights from actually touching some of these shapes here. And cool. So as you can see here, as we're slowly doing it, these shapes aren't being affected by the outside lights, which is pretty nice there. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Of course, we can kind of go in and select our specific settings. I'm actually going to go in and turn on that bloom again, but other than that, that is pretty much it for this one here. Let's hop up into the wrap up section and see how we did. All right, so jumping into the wrap-up section, I can say for sure there is a definite likeness between the two. I think with our original image, it is a much higher quality. It looks a lot more realistic here just because the materials look a lot more real. However, with the render we created, it replicates a lot of what the original image is doing. So you can see a lot of those really cool highlights. You have a lot of the same materials almost with some of the planks outside, both on the ground and then also the fence as well too. We do have some similar light sources. Really big difference is there is a lot more lighting in the tree versus our render that we brought up here. There are some highlights here on the top of the tree. However, in the actual image, we have a lot more highlights going on in the actual tree itself, which kind of gives it a nice blend between like the back area of the tree and the foreground of the tree. So that is pretty nice. And then same thing with the bushes as well. You do have kind of like a lighter color when it comes to the bushes that are on the left side, where in the image that we brought up, they're a little bit more dark and not as translucent as the actual image goes. As far as some positives go, I'm really liking the highlights that we did in the foreground and then on the wall as well too. And then I thought the color of the sky, I think we represented that pretty well. Some opportunities I would probably address is the ceiling has some actual planks. I think I didn't have a lot of options when it came to that, just because at the time of making this, I didn't have max on 1, so I didn't have access to those planks, nor did I try to see if any outside sources beyond Cinema 4D had that same material that I could bring in. So I found this one. This is rather simple here, but I think if I were to really try to replicate it even more, I would find that those with the actual planks. And then I think with the back wall here, where the circle is or the opening is, it's just not the same exactly. Maybe whether the shape is off as far as the wall goes, or we didn't get a big enough circle, maybe that's it, but it just doesn't seem like the same size versus the actual image here. But other than that, I had a lot of fun with this one. Of course, I really believe that we got a general likeness to the original. However, there are some things missing, and then that realism really doesn't transfer over as well. But other than that, that is pretty much it for this one. Let me know what you guys think. I still had a lot of fun with this. This was definitely my first time with a lot of this sort of architecture and these materials in general. So I think it is a good shot as far as our first try goes, but I think going forward we kind of know a little bit more as far as what we need to work on and what we did well as well too. So, but like I said, just let me know what you guys think. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.